the garden of the unseen. There are walls in Oberhausen between the old houses where stone flowers grow. They are lichens, you see, but lichens that have taken on fantastical shapes, frozen coils of mist, melted lace left by the sun, velvet cushions that look like the fingerprints of some forgotten giant. An old gardener named Grillo called this place the Garden of the Unseen, and he was its keeper. Every day he walked the city, stopping at the right patch of wall, staring into it for a long time as though recognizing a face. And then, quietly, he would speak to it. People walked past, noticing nothing but walls covered in stains. Children would run by and shout, "Madman! He's talking to stones!" Adults would tap their temples. For them it was mold, the traces of time and dampness. For Grillo, it was a herbarium of the city's very soul. He knew that each such flower was a frozen dream, unspoken, unlived. When someone died, their work unfinished, or their love unconfessed, their final thought searched for a place to hide, and the walls of the city took them in, like a sanctuary for forgotten hopes. He had inherited this knowledge from his grandfather, and he knew the price. He could bring these flowers back to life. One day at the wall of the old factory, he stopped before a grey, wrinkled growth, like the clenched fist of an infant. He touched it and began to speak softly. "This was the dream of Anna, the baker's daughter. You dreamed of building a bridge across the canal," he said, touching the grey flower. "You never finished, but now others are building bridges, and that is your doing too." And as he spoke, the grey stone began to change. It took on a soft, pearlescent hue and bloomed into a tiny bud, like a single apple blossom. A sweet, almost imperceptible scent of almonds and watercolor paints hung in the air. At that very moment, Grillo felt something click inside him, like a hidden door in his heart slamming shut. With painful clarity, he remembered his own youthful dream, to leave for Hamburg, to become a sailor, to see the northern lights. The memory was vivid, but the feeling behind it, the thirst for wind, for salt on his lips, for an endless horizon, was gone. Erased like a chalk drawing on wet pavement. He had given it away for Anna's blooming flower. That was the price. For every flower brought back to life, for every story returned to the world, he paid with one of his own unfulfilled hopes. And so, most of the time, the Garden of the Unseen remained asleep. Grillo walked between the walls like a man moving through the aisles of a giant library, reading the stories from memory, but never telling them aloud. He hoarded his own dreams, the dream of learning to play the violin, the dream of a quiet evening with a woman he had never met, the dream of writing a book. They were his treasure, his fuel. But one day, an elderly woman came to the wall. She was weeping, staring at an unremarkable lichen the color of rust. "They say you can hear the walls," she said. "My brother died here. He was a poet, but he burned all his verses. I want at least one word of his to remain. I want him to live, if only in my memory. You are my last hope." Grillo looked at her, then at the grey stone. He did not see rust. He saw frozen ink, unreleased rhymes, and he understood. His own quiet, personal dream of a book was nothing compared to this woman's grief and the gifted poet's wasted talent. He stepped forward, placed his hand on the stone, and began to read. The words were born from the stone itself, lines about rain washing away the borders between worlds, about a silence louder than any scream, about a love that lives as long as someone remembers it. Under his palm, the stone began to tremble. It darkened, turned smooth as polished agate, and on its surface appeared the finest silver veins, forming the lines of an invisible poem. The air filled with the scent of old paper and a thunderstorm, and inside Grillo a light went out. His dream of a book was gone. He knew then that he would never write it. He looked at the woman. There were no more tears in her eyes, only quiet sorrow and gratitude. She wrote down everything he had said in a notebook, pressed it to her chest and whispered, Thank you. Now I know. Now he will live on. You did this. She left. Grylo remained alone in his garden. He walked slowly along the wall, touching the sleeping stone flowers. Here, the unfulfilled love of a postman. Here, the dream of an apprentice craftsman to invent a flying machine. Here, the quiet pride of a laundress who raised 3 children. He approached the most unremarkable, dusty growth in a dark corner. He had always avoided this one. He knew it was his own, not yet petrified flower. The flower of his last hope. The hope that his life, his sacrifice, would not pass unnoticed, that someone, someday, perhaps, would remember him. The old gardener made his choice. He would not take his dream with him into the grave. He touched his own flower and began to speak softly, addressing the wall, the sky, eternity itself. There once lived a gardener who watered stones. He told the story, giving away his final dream to bring it to life for others, so that the garden of the unseen would not die with him. His own stone flower began to bloom, slowly, becoming a tiny heart carved from opal, and Grylo himself felt himself growing lighter, more transparent, felt himself slowly turning into a quiet whisper, a gentle shadow, yet another beautiful and eternal flower in the garden of the unseen. He had chosen the memory of others over a future for himself, and in that choice lay his own eternal blossoming.